I'm Don Ridenauer. I'm a licensed mental health counselor in Indiana. And today we're going to talk about depression. And since the focus of my videos is everyday mental health, we're going to talk about how they affect real people, or how depression affects real people in their everyday lives, and then ways I have found working with clients that are effective in helping them relieve that depression. So these are what every therapist, psychologist, psychiatrist uses to diagnose depression. These are the things we look for. And we tie them to how we see them in that person's life. Are these the things we're really seeing? And it just depends on how the particular therapist you are talking with or working with, or that you find to work with, approaches practice. So for instance, I do diagnose people. I have to, it's part of my job, but I don't really completely work from a diagnosis. What I work from is the behavior people are telling me is bothering them in their life. And then we look for the factors that go into that. How did that develop? And what can we do about it in everyday living to relieve the stress and strain and the dysfunction, move them towards a happier, healthier, more productive and rich life. On the other end of the spectrum, our psychiatrist uses those diagnoses pretty tightly because they help determine what class of medications are appropriate for that particular person. And then within that class, of course, there are usually a lot of options. So it really depends. And while I'm not totally diagnosis focused, I really do have to give an accurate diagnosis. And these are the things I look for. So I look for depressed mood, that feeling of sadness, of really being down, empty, hopeless, and worse than just a bad day or an off day. And so I'm looking for that most of the day, nearly every day. And that's from self-report of the person, or it's from the people around them have told them that they need to get some help. Next thing I'm looking for is a real decrease in their interests or in pleasure from the things they used to find pleasure in or were interesting to them. And again, nearly every day and most days. The next thing I'm looking for is weight loss or weight gain. And I don't mean a few pounds, I mean 20 pounds when they're not really trying to gain weight or lose weight. We're looking for a significant change. The other way it's often said is 5% of body mass. So either one, as a rough rule of thumb, I use about 20 pounds. And then the other part of that is appetite, a real decrease or a real increase in appetite. Someone who just cannot get full. They just eat and eat and eat, and they cannot get full, and they feel empty. And a lot of times that's called eating your emotions, or and it's a self-soothing kind of thing. But it's out of control when you have major depression. So, and then the opposite is obviously just never wanting to eat, having to force yourself to eat. That would be the other extreme of that. Again, with most of these things, it's either way too much or way not enough. So when it comes to sleep, same thing, either insomnia or what's called hyposomnia, which just means sleeping all the time. You just can't get out of bed. You stay there for 2 or 3 or 4 days at a time, rarely up. Except when you have to. I've had people tell me they really only got up to occasionally go to the bathroom for 2 weeks, hardly ever eating anything. And then the other one is, as I mentioned, insomnia, and that is just staying awake for 2 or 3 days at a time, or barely sleeping, a few hours here, a few hours there, but nothing more than that. The next one is psychomotor agitation or retardation. Retardation in that sense means simply that slow movement, slow to react, slow to do anything. So on the one hand, you've got restlessness and agitation. On the other hand, you've got complete lethargy, unwillingness, inability to even move. So next one is fatigue, loss of energy nearly every day. Feel like you're dragging yourself around. So that's really common. Just wake up in the morning feeling exhausted, and it's all you can do to get out of bed and go do things. Often put things off and don't do them. That would be typical of major depression. Next is feelings of worthlessness or excessive or inappropriate guilt, even to the point of being delusional guilt. And I'll mention that in just a minute. And again, nearly every day. Worthlessness is just the kind of self-statements, oh, you're no good, you're just a burden to everybody, even gets to the point where it can begin to become suicidal ideation. Everybody would be better without me. I'm just a burden on everyone. I'm worthless. I'm not worth the air I breathe, that kind of thing. I mentioned delusional guilt. That would be like there was a ship that sank in the Atlantic Ocean, and I was thinking about a ship sinking, and so it's my fault. I did that to all of them. That's delusional guilt. Not common at all. Typically, excessive guilt is something that really did happen, that you really didn't have control over, but you still feel very guilty. I run into this in grief sometimes where, well, like one kid told me recently that his mother had died and he felt terribly guilty because he stopped at her doorway and she was feeling badly and was in bed asleep, and he decided to let her sleep instead of telling her goodbye. And then he went off to school, and he believed, until we talked about it, he believed that if he had gone in and awakened her, he would have been able to save her life. And so it was his fault. That's typical guilt that we were able to work through and give him relief from that. Next thing is just a diminished ability to even think or concentrate, becoming very indecisive, just can't think clear enough to even make any decisions. That's pretty common. And then finally, the recurrent thoughts of death, fear of dying, but also suicidal ideation, but without a specific plan, or a suicide attempt or a specific plan. These have to be present for a 2-week period, and they have to be a change from normal functioning, so that there is definitely a difference, a change at the onset of a depressive episode. And there are 2 that have to be present, and that's depressed mood or loss of interest or pleasure. One or the other have to be present. And then there's a time factor that it goes on for a while, but that's just 2 weeks really. And this is major depression. There are other depressive disorders. So what I want to do now is just summarize a little bit and just say depression is very common. It's very treatable. There's no reason to go along suffering and suffering and suffering when there's help out there, and there's effective help out there. So if you've really been struggling with it, you've tried a bunch of stuff, but you can't keep going at it, you just don't have the motivation, or you don't see the results you're looking for, then find a therapist that has psychiatric backup and begin to make your life better. So glad you joined us. If you enjoyed this live stream, it'll be up as a recording. You can like it, you can follow me, and I appreciate your support. Thank you very much.